Hey everyone, it's Nate. Just a quick note to share that I will be doing some guided tours of the Punk Rock Museum Saturday, December 7th in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you're in or anywhere near Las Vegas, come on down Saturday, December 7th, 1:30 p.m. We'll talk records, punk rock artifacts, share stories, anecdotes, and more. I'll even be doing some podcasts from the Punk Rock Museum that weekend with various punk rock legends. It's going to be a fantastic time. Hell, we could even get a beer and a tattoo together on site. That's Saturday, December 7th, 1:30 p.m., the Punk Rock Museum in Las Vegas, Nevada. See you there.
And now, on with the show. Welcome to The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Well, hey everyone, it's Nate. Welcome to episode 476 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And you gotta forgive my voice this week, everyone. I'm traveling around, staying in a lot of air-conditioned hotels, and I'm here in Las Vegas where there's a lot of smoke in the air, so my little lungs are looking to kind of keep up. I'm sure it'll sort itself out. But look, you guys aren't seeking an update on my pulmonary system. You're probably here because we have back on the show today Jeff and Stephen McDonald of the band Redd Kross. Now, some of you may recall we recently had the fellas on episode 454. This is when their recent Redd Kross double album had just dropped. We spoke all about that, but Jeff and Stephen have been very busy this year. Not only with that double album, but also a book, Now You're One of Us, which is now in the tippy tops of all the music bios and entertainment book sections. But there's also a documentary that is now getting screened across the U.S., Born Innocent, the Redd Kross Story. It's directed by Andrew Reich, and it tells the story of Redd Kross. And I gotta tell you, this is an outstanding watch. I've seen it several times. It really does a magnificent job of capturing the story of the band, the LA punk scene, the interaction of the brothers, the family, and a whole lot more. There's a bunch of trailers online if you want to Google one and get a taste of what it's like. Or you could also go to reddkrossfilm.com. There's lots of upcoming screenings, many of them with Q&A from the band on site. So check it out. I know there's screenings coming out for Los Angeles, Phoenix, Dallas, Detroit, New Jersey, Toronto. So head up to reddkrossfilm.com, see if your city is listed, and if it is, lucky you, grab some tickets and enjoy the film. And hey, we hope you enjoy this podcast, and we encourage each of you to follow it in your podcast app. The whole catalog of 470-something episodes is freely available anytime. You can always get the ad-free and high-resolution versions on our Patreon page, patreon.com/vinylguide. And again, we've got tons of interviews we hope you'll all enjoy, including the likes of Lucas Harwood of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, episode 474, Jerry Cantrell of Alice in Chains, episode 467, Eddie Kramer talks engineering and producing Jimi Hendrix, episode 466, Jack Douglas discusses producing John Lennon and Yoko Ono's Double Fantasy, as well as those final days. Those are episodes 439 and 440, and so many more. So please press that plus sign in Apple Podcasts or the follow button on Spotify, and you'll never miss another episode. Well, my voice is already given out. Let's get into our conversation with Jeff and Stephen McDonald of Redd Kross.
Can you see me?
I can't see you. I can hear you.
Do you need to see me? Hold on, let me see.
You're a rather handsome man. I don't mind.
Okay, let me see. I got it. There we go.
Hey, there you are. Hello.
Am I sidewards?
You are sidewards.
Okay, what about now?
Okay, you're still side. No. Yeah, you're fine. You're
Okay,
good.
good.
You're good.
Okay.
How are you, Jeff?
Good. I'm really good. Just kind of hanging out. We're, decompressing from the last, spring and summer tour. Was really grueling and really fun, but intense. Like, so, these next couple of shows are our last little things we do, band wise until something else comes up.
Oh, okay. Any thoughts or opportunities to tour the Pacific Rim, Australia, or anywhere like that?
Yeah, that's probably what would be next, would be Australia and Japan. I've always wanted to do South Asia. A lot bands are starting to play in places like Vietnam and or even in Korea. But we'll just have to see. I don't think we have the agent for that yet, but who knows? So I can't imagine not doing an Australian leg in the next few months. It's kind of based around whether whatever Steven schedule, because he kind of does both bands, the Melvins and Redd Kross.
Yeah, and I just saw the whole Melvins tour kind of unveiled for next year.
I know. I don't know how him and Dale, they're monsters, because I feel like the past several months almost killed me. I mean, we were able to keep up a standard that was very exciting and good, but I mean, it's just like, I can't imagine like being home for a month and then leaving again for another. That's always been the thing about touring. It's like, it's especially for a group like us where our live performances are really where, that's our main thing. It's what we focus on the most. And it just like too much of it is just, whoa. But then you miss it, so it's weird.
Are you kind of you've turned into a little bit more of a homebody over the years?
Well, compared to Steven, yes, definitely. I mean, I went 9 years without performing. Like after our album Show World and in the late 90s, I had a daughter and I was just kind of hanging out. So I kind of wanted to learn how to, use some of the equipment that was in the house. We had like an old analog 8-track tape machine, and so it was just turned into fun things like doing videos, family band videos, the Malibu Kids, and kind of just doing my own experimental tracks. I didn't step on stage for almost a decade. Steven was playing with other bands, and he was still full on into that world. I just don't know. I just didn't feel it until we actually decided to do it.
Yeah. Well, like Steve, sorry, we've been talking about you while you're not here. You and Dale being I guess, road fit, constantly going out, where Jeff, I think, is finding a little bit more downtime to his preference at this point.
I don't mind downtime.
But you said it was my preference, which is the truth. But like Dale and Steven they're just beasts.
I mean, I have the necessity. I have to do it. But, and I mean that in a practical sense, but in a spiritual sense, I mean, in all different senses, but the practical definitely comes to play for me, maybe sooner than it would for Jeff.
Right. Well, I was just talking to one of the King Gizzard guys. They were talking about being on the road and then this re-entry into normal life, which necessitates all of a sudden now you have to make your own bed, you have to do your own laundry. What is that adjustment like? You guys have just been on a big tour. I think it's probably a little more natural for you, Steven. Yeah.
You mean to make the adjustment back at home?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's always awkward. It's always it's because I have a wife and child, and they're always a little bit like, oh, right, you.
The dog's not sure of you anymore. That sort of thing.
They're just kind of like, oh, right. The way we've been living, we need to make room for you again. Okay. I always have to show up with like my chisel. Like, remember?
Yeah, I've experienced that too. Because growing up, I mean, kind of my wife is a touring musician as well. She was doing the touring when bringing up my child, and we would always get into complete and total routines, and then she'd come back and try to like to throw her gauntlet down, and we would be like, what? It was just like always like a huge adjustment.
The King Gizzard guys, I remember I met those guys like in I don't know, 10 years ago or so. But I remember talking to them in Philadelphia. I was touring with Off, and Mario Rubalcaba and I went out and saw them. And they were on their way they were doing dates, but then they were going to go live in a house together in upstate New York and make a record. and obviously worked out for them. But the thing that I remember was like, oh, these guys are really living it, like in the classic sense, like the way the Alice Cooper band all like, moved to Detroit together or whatever, just like living in a house. And yeah, so I don't know what it's like, because that's beyond just going on tour. That's being truly like the wandering minstrels of the
Yeah.
world. And so I can imagine like suddenly practical matters not being as much of a concern, and they can go back to a place they once called home and trying to figure out what is life, might be particularly odd. I mean, Jeff and I have a lot of grounding in our homes in Los Angeles. We've always lived here. We luckily inherited a place that most musicians have to migrate to, um, just by nature of the choices our parents made. But and so we have family and immediate and extended here. We're very lucky to have a lot of grounding. So when I come home, it's actually the best feeling in the world that I get to just like sleep guilt free. I at least get a period where I don't feel like I need to be productive. There's always at least a grace period week. Although this one's a little funky because we're playing the last shows of the tour this weekend after a 10-day break. So, and then we're doing it with a new crew. So it means getting a new thing together. It's almost like starting over after like a year's worth of really hard work. So I didn't get quite that thing that I plan on fully taking advantage of come this Tuesday when it's truly all over for me.
Okay, because you guys are playing the show at the Belasco, I think, on
Yeah, we're playing the
Saturday.
Belasco, the big L7 Fast and Frightening takeover, their bid to start a new festival. And it's the first one. So I'm starting to get all the advanced stuff from the promoters who are running the show, and it's like it's gonna be chaos. And I already feel like
It'll be
chaos.
fast and frightening.
What's that? It's going to be fast and frightening. And that's great. That's great. But I just suddenly realized like, oh, they've got more on their plate than I do, but still I'm going to have to like, because I want to support them in their endeavor. I think it's great. But like, don't take us from an hour set to 40 minutes set without telling me, kind of thing. At the last minute and all this like crazy commotion, and suddenly I have to be like, excuse me, everyone stop running around for a second. That's not what you said when that's like
I'm not
crap
sure
like that.
where they're going to put 4 stages at the Belasco. That's
I have no idea. I mean, it's quite an ambitious thing, and I'm very proud of them for doing it. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, it's more than I would bite off. I can barely manage the anxiety of keeping these plates in the air.
And they are Los Angeles, so they should definitely stake their claim.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I support them. I'm honored to be a member of the whatever whatever the maiden voyage. Let's say
right.
that.
Okay. Well, look, and you've got all these documentary screenings, the Q&A, and
Yeah.
I got to tell you, look, I love this documentary. I've watched it 8, 10 times maybe. It is
Oh my
really,
God.
Wow.
it is most of the times with my pants on, and it is really phenomenal. There's so much to cover. It's so dense. Well, what was the experience like for you guys? I know you've got a history of being quite vulnerable and being a bit of an open book, but I imagine there were some times it was pretty difficult in that process.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because you always kind of wonder like how deep are you going to go, and what is still entertaining, and what do you hold on to for yourself, and all the normal things that people go through when they do any kind of autobiographical work. For me, it was just enough because I felt that it ended up being very entertaining, but not hollow. Just there was substance. So we couldn't have wished for more than that.
Right. It would seem to. I mean, did you have the same experience there, Stephen? Is that
Oh
kind
yeah,
of?
it's all worked out. Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to the filmmaker Andrew. I think us trusting him, and it was very. I did, as you can probably already gather from your interactions with us, like I tend to, you know, uh, whatever, I can be controlling, and so that was quite a big ask to not ultimately we didn't get final say over the cut, and that was a very early condition of his, and that was a trial for me at first. And so I required him like garnering my trust and getting a sense of like, not only does he have good intentions, that because many times the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but that he is going to be able to pull it off, and he's going to be able to, because I always wanted it to be, if anything, I was probably the one that was like rooting for it to have personal stuff and for it to be deeper than just like a walk through our catalog. I personally find that stuff a little like, I don't know. I get anxious watching someone just detailing, catalog numbers. And I was more interested in him telling a story that was, that people could relate to on a human level. But then at the same time, like Jeff says, where do you draw the line? And in there is, the gray area, which might have caused a little friction between me and Jeff as well about what we were willing to talk about and not willing to talk about. And, and ultimately it was great though that we had Andrew. I think that Jeff and I work really well with a third person that has, a lot of say, because if it's just him and I figuring out what the best plan is, it often, disintegrates into bickering.
It seems to me, again, as an outsider, you guys have always, brothers do this, right? You aggravate each other, you love each other, it kind of goes back and forth. And it would seem to me that that's just kind of part of the natural thing. And I thought they captured it quite well. There were sometimes I could tell Jeff was irritating you, Stephen, and at times where you were getting under his skin.
Oh yeah, there's the new trailer, and one of the first things you hear coming out of either of our mouths is Jeff saying, "Are you bitter?" Which is
that's taken out of context. I was kind of that was a joke.
But it's a tactic, and it's the kind of thing that people who have lived together for years might resort to. And and it's just like, yeah, he puts that stuff on display. We were ourselves for sure. And it's funny, you say you've watched it 10 times. I've only watched it a couple times. It's hard for me to watch, and it's objectively. I've seen it in the theater with people a few times, and I'm just always it's hard for me to judge, but I get the sense that people aren't leaving early or that they're not blowing sunshine when they say that they really enjoyed it. So I just kind of go with that.
Well, the thing is, for a rock musical, especially from a rock documentary, a music documentary, to actually play for an audience with actual laughs and gasps and various, audible emotions, it's pretty rare. I mean, people really, the last few times I've seen it, I've been really surprised. People are laughing in all the right places. They're mumbling and grumbling when it gets kind of heavy, and everyone seems to really go for the ride, which I have to hand it to Andrew, because we just gave him, we just sat down for these interviews and gave him as much of our history, and he had to put it together and make sure it wasn't any too much Jeff or too much Steve, too much Jeff, just being flip and humor driven, and Stephen being too honest and heavy. There was like just the right amount of both of that to kind of make it an entertaining picture, I think.
So together we make one well-balanced two-headed monster.
One healthy individual and one that belongs in an institution.
Yeah.
I imagine very early on, you guys knew your story was interesting and that it was something that could be written into a documentary. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that you guys knew that you were in a very unique situation, unique story. Was there ever a discussion about doing this beforehand, or how was this the time that it all came together?
Another filmmaker took a stab at it like over a decade ago. And actually the cinematographer, Steve Appleford, he's the common link between that original person, who I can't even remember his name right now. I think it might've been Daniel, and then Andrew. So, but what the question was, did we knew, well, I'm sorry, what was the exact question?
Well, it was like you do this documentary in 2024. I imagine it started in 2020 or something like that. But your guys' story has been very interesting up to this point. Why now? Why wasn't something done earlier? Has there been discussions?
We've been referencing our early kiddie punk era even since like the 90s. Like we opened up our Phase Shifter album with a soundbite from Standing in Front of Poser, which was on our first EP. I think we always have felt a little bit like, Kurt Cobain's cool. He lived under a bridge, whatever. Did you open for Black Flag when you were 12?
Well,
No?
that's also,
I did.
We've been creating the story the whole time as we go. Every single time we do a project together, there's always got to be something that just kind of adds to the mystique. So I said, after all 45 years, there's a lot of mystique. And I think, for a lot of times we would share stories with our friends or people in rock music, and you've got to write a book, you've got to make a documentary. And it's always like, oh yeah, whatever, knowing that it could happen, but neither one of us were going to could actually be at the helm of it. So not until we've met some interesting people that were talented and had a good vision were we able to do it. So we were very
I've
fortunate.
wondered at times whether or not I could be at the helm. I mean, like I just finished listening to Moon Unit Zappa's audiobook, and it's really brilliantly written and read also. And I will say, like during lockdown, I spent a lot of time reflecting, and had been the 40th anniversary since my, abduction episode in my life. And I now had a 12, 13-year-old son my age. So there was a lot for me to reflect about. And then we'd been doing these interviews. So I at some point had started thinking like, well, maybe I would write a book and try to detail that scenario from an adult perspective, understanding it better, and probably more like self-help or something, but what I'm going to say is like the devil is in the details, and it's back to Andrew. And also, if we're going to talk about the book, Dan Epstein, it's like, it's one thing to be able to tell a story in an engaging way, whatever, 5-10 minute version of, some anecdote, but it's another to craft a larger body with, in a linear way or not linear, but in a way that keeps that people don't get confused as they read, they stay engaged. And like my OCD, it's just like, or ADHD, whatever, it's like putting that all into order is a nightmare for me. And I can write a decent Facebook post or whatever that goes on too long and whatever, but it's another thing to try to like put together 300 pages of something, or as Andrew's done, he's told our story in 90 minutes. In film, it's like that is a whole other skill unto itself, and I am humbled by that.
But even that, you have to realize that it's a portion of, it's like a little portion of the story, or it's a serialized version, but it's done in a, but it's successfully done. Because when I'm 62 years old, Steven's in his 50s. We've lived a lot of life, and we've had a lot of experiences. So we could have easily gone, if there was interest, we could have gone the miniseries route. There could have been 4 episodes, of our
We live
story.
in Hollywood. Our kids have gone to schools with the TV writers and the parent and kids of TV writers. People have talked to me about it, because everyone thinks that like, punk rock from the 80s, they think it's, fascinating or whatever. And, but, I'll talk to someone for a little bit, but then it always just kind of peters out because, it's, these things are really, really hard. And our story is not one where you can easily put into a, sort of like a formulaic hero's journey, where everyone gets on board, and then you have these trials, and then you realize in your heart that you are actually your own, own hero or whatever.
Right.
The Dorothy clicks her, ruby slippers together and realizes home is where your heart is, or whatever. One of these things that makes everybody cry at the same time. In reality, our story is real life. And some of the really dramatic things happen in the first act, not in the third act. And it's just, it's not easy. It's not, I think those prove to be special challenges for Andrew. And I think he dealt with it in a really great way.
But again, I absolutely agree. It could have been a serial. It could have been one of those things on Netflix that's like, 3 or 4 episodes or whatever. To be able to condense it all into 90 minutes. One of the things I love about the documentary is it's so rich. It's so fast moving. There's so much information there. What do you think was left? What's part of the story that wasn't really told, or do you think may have been underrepresented in the film?
Well, there's so much because at the same, last year we started writing. We collabed with Dan Epstein and wrote the book, which is through Stephen's eyes and my eyes separately, and then Dan's Dan commenting on it. And there's a lot of stuff in the book that isn't covered in the movie. But I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard to say. I don't watch like at the film or read the book and say, "Oh, that sums up my life perfectly," or even Redd Kross existence, because I mean, it's just they could only possible to capture a certain bit of it. I don't know exactly what hasn't been told.
Well, I know that there's
needs to be told.
Well, I know that Andrew plans on doing like a director's cut, or whatever, a DVD that has like hours of more footage because he has so much stuff. And then
for the hardcore fans that are wondering why the Love Doll movies aren't in it, or why isn't there more on
nothing
other
on Bitchin' Ass
like
or anything like that. It's there's a few things that right.
Yeah, exactly. That's a lot of stuff like or stuff I did during our stuff that both of us did during our 9-year hiatus from playing live. And there's quite a lot of that. And and Andrew even took some liberties, like for instance in the film, of that period, he only mentions that I failed 2 auditions to be in arena bands. And he doesn't mention all the things I didn't fail at. And I realize that, I mean, sure, my ego's a little like, ouch. But then there's mostly it's just like, that's a device to like get the viewer on our side. And it's not about whether or not I'm a loser or not. It's about whether or not, how does this relate to Redd Kross and where does he end up with Redd Kross?
Well, I thought what he was going with, what I take from that is not so much like you being successful working as a working musician, more like you trying your hand at rejoining another organization, like you had with Redd Kross, and then not getting the like becoming a member of the Smashing Pumpkins, or becoming a member of whoever else you tried out for, a Weezer, and like as a replacement to Redd Kross. I don't see it as the same way as like, oh yeah, you did tour with Beck and you toured with Sparks. You were never going to be part of their band. You were never going to be a member, but you could have been a member of Weezer or a member of Smashing
Well, I'm sure
Pumpkins.
you can take many things from it, but the main sort of device that I'm naming is that it's like this underdog effect, and that the viewer roots for the underdog, and if they think that you're all sorted and fine, well then there's no crisis there to be resolved. And in the reality, there wasn't much of a crisis to resolve because I was doing well as a producer and I was doing lots of other things. But he chose to not. He chose to skip that stuff, and that's fine. I don't. It's not the Steve McDonald story, believe it or not.
So, did you learn anything about yourselves by watching the documentary?
I feel like I learned about our dynamic more. I got a little bit more objectivity about Jeff and my dynamic. But that you can never know enough. It's always difficult and hard to navigate creative relationships. I hear this for everybody I know that is in collaboration. And if anything, if like I just heard a Conan O'Brien interview with Eric Idle, and I loved it because Eric Idle, they were talking about how, many, like with Monty Python, like the Beatles felt this way too, that like when the Beatles kind of disbanded, well, then the new band in town was Python. And that the conflicts that they had were really, really painful. And they could go from being really painful to like hilarious in a day. And it would be over the stupidest things that often I would be like, that's not a funny chair. This is a funny chair. And it just comes down to subjectivity, right? It's like what the fuck, any chair, but at the same time, you really value these other people's opinions. And if that's the way they feel about it, then, like where intellect and then gut have to intersect, and how you navigate that with another human being is always complicated. And so I think
Which is a normal part of the creative, a creative partnership. Usually, any creative partnership you read about has they have these conflicts, and it kind of it adds to the kind of spark of it makes it special.
But I guess you get pulled down into the minutia of it on a daily basis when you're dealing with that. So perhaps maybe, Steve, what you're saying is it allowed you kind of a little more of a bird's eye view of the relationship.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And and the thing about what I was trying to describe, I think it's also maybe something I'm more like arriving at lately, is that like, yeah, it's painful and that's okay. And that the idea of an expectation that it shouldn't be painful, or always waiting for the I can't do this anymore moment, that like, why torture yourself with that? Just get on with it, and expect that as a part of it. But whatever, it's hard. You take your own baggage into it, and you may have your own fear of abandonment or whatever it is, or maybe you need those guardrails to not completely misbehave. I don't know. But, anyway, I'm getting a bit overly analytical for that question. But I just think that it maybe gave me a little objectivity about our dynamic.
Jeff, anything from you?
Yeah, I mean, it's just always kind of weird to pull back and then look at the visuals. I mean, we did, we did interviews for 8 years, essentially, from the beginning of the film until it was actually finished. So, every interview had a different tone, like some were more serious, some were a little bit more, Stephen and myself were a little bit at each other. And then some of them were just fun partnerships. And, so like I had, I didn't know what to expect with the finished film. And I just think it's all kind of represented in the film. So there's, there's little moments I'm like, ugh, and then there's, moments where I think something is hilarious and it's just, I like to try to, as if I'm watching someone else's movie. And, I try to watch it and be objective and kind of, which is kind of a little bit difficult, but it's not impossible.
I mean, maybe, I'm sorry, I know I already had my turn, but I think something worth adding to it, sort of part of what I was saying a second ago, and not to compare us to them, but, what I really got from the Beatles Get Back thing was just, not only it was so relatable, but just that partnership between John and Paul. And how I got the sense that even regardless of what's going on or what might be difficult in the moment, that they really valued their unique partnership. And I think that maybe the movie for me is an opportunity for me to see like how unique our partnership is, and that, all success or failure aside, whatever all the other sort of measuring, the way we measure these things, that doesn't really matter. It's ultimately like, look what we have. And it won't last forever. And so why don't we, it's all the more fodder to stomach the difficultness and to pursue it, rather than to fall into the futility, which is so easy of the statement, what's the point? Or is it worth it? And it's like, well, no, it's pretty fucking special. And so it would be really hard for it to not be worth it, because it's hard to fall onto the special. And especially after 9 years of hiatus, and Jeff was talking about how it's not always easy to be in a part of another group or whatever. It's like, I know firsthand how rare these things are. So that would be something else, I think, that is, if I didn't already know explicitly, it's become more explicit.
One of the things I took away from the film, not only is it a really well-crafted story of the band and a lot of music history in there, which I love, but also just the story of the brothers and the family. And it even got me thinking a little bit different about my relationship with my brothers. When someone, needles you, most of the time it's out of love. There's an undercurrent of that in there. There's
Are
always-
you bitter? Are you bitter about it?
Well, I know exactly when he said that to you, and whatever emotion you had, it just ratcheted up. Whatever you were outraged about at that moment, it
You can
doubled
hear
that.
my already shrill tone get shriller.
If it was filmed in infrared, you would have gotten like pink.
I think it's one thing I learned from the movie, to take the bait a little less. But
you give it back. I mean, you've learned from a very good teacher.
so where did you arrive about your own relationship? Are you going to start a band with your brother now?
No, absolutely not. But just, when he talks a little shit to me, or he'll say something that I know he's trying to provoke me. I know he's trying to do something. It helped me recognize that, rather than, again, being in the minutia of it and just reacting at the moment. It's like, okay, all right. It's a game of volleyball. It's not, combat.
Well, that's nice
Right.
to hear. Like one of the things that feels very, uncomfortable about putting yourself on display that way is just that you want people to identify. The goal is that people will come back and be like, yeah, I have that, like what you just said. I have these experiences too, and I find myself troubled with them too. But then the fear is that people are going to sit back and go like, you guys are, figure it out. You're pretty deluded or whatever like that. Everybody's going to view you, not relate to you and just be alienated by you. And you're going to walk away feeling like even more broken. And so it's really nice to hear that you identified with it and that even took something away about your own life from it. So thank you.
And also, when you're in a band, it's a singular thing. So being brothers aside, just being in the same band for years and years, people forget that, like, you're not a two-headed monster with one opinion. It's two adults who have very different views on things, and then, couple that in with, like, having this complete shared existence even before the band. It could be, it's pretty amazing that we haven't killed each other yet. It's like,
Well,
that
I
the
always
fact,
say, for a second,
That could be the next movie. It could be like the,
well, like I was promoting our European tour, and I even started promoting it before Oasis got back together. And I was trying to get people to our Manchester gig via my Instagram account. And at first I was saying things like, oh yeah, brother team that can keep the band together, and then, which is really annoying. And, and then of course they got back together and I felt completely diminished. But the other thing that I also thought about was like, I can't claim any superiority at all. I haven't had the challenges those guys have had. I mean, obviously everyone has their own unique challenges, but like the success that they've have been awarded is also the success they've endured. And I could only imagine what it would be like to have those kinds of shared responsibilities. We haven't been tested at that level at all. I mean, sure, it's a test to like suffer disappointment together, but then what's it like when suddenly you're, the livelihood of tens or 50s or hundreds of people, and you need to not get sick this day, or it's a big deal, or whatever, what have you. And I can only imagine it must be so hard to navigate those waters, especially with all the sibling baggage that it's impossible to not
just
float around.
Being an observer, obviously, it would feel to me that you guys, Redd Kross and even the Brotherhood, it seems to be in a very happy spot at the moment. It wasn't always the case, and there seems to have been a lot of pressure early on. Would you agree with that? Is this kind of the time to enjoy the fruits of the labor?
Well, I think yes. I mean, we get to play together and be, firing on all cylinders, and that is a joy. That is a true. That's, the reason we do it, and we get to do all these amazing things. So yeah, but sometimes I personally have to take stock and like, oh my God, I have to stop and think, what's going on here? We get to do this, we get to do that, we get to talk about, our lives. And it's just like, it's so great. But I do have to actually stop occasionally and just I hate stop and smell the roses. I do have to stop and smell the roses because I can become a little bit overwhelmed by how overwhelming it is to have everything in front of you. Like, and I think, Steve, did we play 70 shows in the past couple of months?
That's what I'm saying. I think it's roughly 70.
Yeah, so it's like, it's a lot, but it's like we got to play 70 shows in the past couple of months, and now that we've finished that portion of it, it's really great. I have to really make sure I don't just like I would have when I was in my 20s or 30s, just to kind of really feel it, like really, like be excited. Movies coming out, and we get to talk to an audience and not be overwhelmed by how, by the fear of doing that kind of stuff, or it's just, I don't know. It is a happy time.
Oh, I would say I'm very proud of our new record. I think that that's proof that we're functioning in a new way.
I'm proud of all three things. I'm proud of the record, the book, and and the movie. It's amazing that they all came out to our liking, which I didn't have expectations that would happen. I figured I would have issues with something along the way, but actually everything's been very smooth. I'm very proud of everything I'm proud unleashing.
I'm proud of the movie and the book, but I think from those two things for me, I'm just mostly grateful, and grateful that they got done, and grateful that they seem to have gotten done well. As far as the heavy lifting, it wasn't on our shoulders, but the album, the heavy lifting was on our shoulders. And I think that, at times in our history, we've been very dysfunctional, and just one of the ways you can measure that is how well, if you can't function, you don't get anything done. If a factory doesn't function well, then it doesn't produce anything. And, and I'm not sitting here to shame us or whatever, but I just think at times in our career, we have not been as functional as, I think that's the proof that we weren't that functional, that our output wasn't as much as it could have been, or whatever. I'm not regretting. I'm just saying that, that there seems to be sign of growth, and that the tangible thing that is a proof of that for me, the skeptic, that gives me faith, is that I can hold this double record in my hand. And I would say it's the one I'm the most proud of. And it's the one that if someone asked me tomorrow, I don't know anything about your band, but I love your movie, what should I listen to? I would say, listen to our new album. And it has like the best sort of cross section of what we're capable of. And it's done in a way that I am really proud of. And at this late stage, that is great. And to be like an early starter, but maybe a late bloomer, that's fine with me, but I know that it's also temporary too. And that, whatever I'm feeling confident about today I could lose that tomorrow. I don't think there's any enlightenment that sticks, I think that it's a constant process, and it always has to be maintained. And, we're going to have to take a breath from each other after this touring. I think that it's gone really well, but it's also still just a challenge to be in such close quarters, to have the shared responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. But I look at the album as like proof that, like, if we're available to it, that this is possible.
Yeah. Well, what is it? Smooth sea never made a skilled sailor, right? So
I like it.
Okay, I got a few questions about contents within the movie. And this is where I probably got to tell people, if you don't like spoilers, here's where you pause or whatever like that.
Okay.
Now, you talked about David Bowie seeing your first nightclub gig. I think that was Hong Kong Cafe, Black Flag, Germs. Let me know if I've got any of this incorrect. Any ideas how Bowie ended up at the show?
Hey there, all you record nerds. I want to tell you about BagsUnlimited.com. BagsUnlimited.com has a huge selection of vinyl record supplies. Whether you collect LPs, 7-inch singles, 78 shellacs, or anything in between, BagsUnlimited.com will sort you out. From polyline sleeves to cardboard record mailers to 7-inch storage boxes and archive quality record sleeves, protect your records of any size and shape at BagsUnlimited.com. Whether you have a small small personal record collection, or you're running a massive record shop, you can grab a small supply or even buy in bulk at bagsunlimited.com. And they've got some really incredible, unique stuff. Bagsunlimited.com even has special size sleeves made especially to protect your box sets, storage boxes and sleeves for cassette tapes, protective supplies for reel-to-reel, and yes, even 8-tracks. Just go to bagsunlimited.com, click on audio supplies, and prepare to be impressed by all the options they have. That's bagsunlimited.com. Oh, and hey, record nerds, don't forget to clean your records with the very best and safest record cleaner, the Groove Washer. Make your records look and sound their very best and store them with confidence using the new Groove Washer Groove Guard record sleeves. You gotta try this out. It makes a huge difference to the quality of your vinyl experience. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record store and accept no substitutes. Or head over to groovewasher.com and use discount code VINYLGUIDE10.
All hail the Groove Washer.
That's groovewasher.com, discount code VINYLGUIDE10. Hey there, audiophiles. If you're seeking stylish furniture to showcase your stereo and record collection, well, look no further than SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Sidetracked Workshop designs extraordinarily elegant record cabinets and consoles that add sophistication and panache to your music hobby. Handcrafted in the good old USA in the vinyl-loving city of Portland, Oregon, Sidetracked Workshop's designs are a music lover's dream. Made with real walnut veneered wood and brass accents, these gorgeous designs add class and taste to the record room and ship fully assembled and ready to enjoy. Just check out the designs for yourself at SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Look, you spend thousands of dollars on records. Don't keep them in a crate, and don't risk your records on those feeble wooden pegs from IKEA. Your music deserves the dignity of Sidetracked Workshop. That's SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Elegant solutions for the vinyl lifestyle.
You talked about David Bowie seeing your first nightclub gig. I think that was Hong Kong Cafe, Black Flag, Germs. Let me know if I've got any of this incorrect. Any ideas how Bowie ended up at the show?
Only theories. I mean, we can only have theories because we know we're both, rock historians of
But
sorts.
Steve, I thought you said that he was doing his stint at the Forum for the stage concerts at that time.
I don't remember. No,
I thought
don't
you
know
found
that.
the dates.
Well, that would be easy. The internet could be helpful with that.
Because so that's the stage tour was Lodger.
I think Lodger might have come out later that year. We'll have to
Then
look
what
at
album was he promoting for that record? With
Well,
the Neon Light record.
This was in 79. I think that record might be 78. I could be wrong about that.
Right.
I was guessing more like maybe he was mixing Lodger in Los Angeles. But at any rate, the two questions would be this. Was he just perusing Chinatown because he has an affinity for Asian women? Or was he interested in, had he heard about the punk scene in LA and wanted to know what's going on down there in Chinatown, which either is, or was he interested in doing both? and any of those could be true. He definitely wasn't already a fan of Redd Kross because we didn't have a record out yet.
Although his next album, he assimilated a lot of what he saw on stage that night.
Yeah,
it was obvious.
He got an 11-year-old bass player after that, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, but he was known for always having his ear to the ground. I mean, that was part of his whole thing in the 60s. And he was, I think till the end, always interested in what was new and what was coming up. I think he was a big Lord fan. At the very end was the last thing he publicly spoke about. But, he was someone that always, I think around that time he had publicly talked about how he really liked Devo, and obviously his friend Brian Eno produced Devo that year, so it makes sense that he would have known there was something going on in Chinatown that he was interested in.
At that point, punk in LA, correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't like we think of punk in LA. It was very niche. It was a very small community at that
tiny.
point. Yeah. So
It was pre-hardcore, so all the groups were kind of made up of weird misfits and art students, and who were all like 10 years older than us, or just like people who there wasn't like really a look or a sound to it. It was a really exciting place to kind of learn how to play music in, because the bands, there was such a variety. Like anytime you go to a show in those days, it was like a variety show. You would see like the Controllers and the Bags and and some other band, and they really had nothing to do with each other except for they kind of came up from the same place. The Mutants from San Francisco. It was always like a variety show, but on a very micro level.
Which would also bring it back to Bowie for a second. It seems like that would intrigue him too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he did that. I mean, like no one knew who the Velvet Underground was when he was, doing Velvet Underground covers in the late 60s, early 70s. So, it's like, it's like you combine the people that you admire and create something new with the sum of their parts. He was really good at it. That's why
really good.
That's why I think that a little bit of the Scary Monsters album sounds a little bit like early Redd Kross, but I don't know.
Oh, you're serious about that? Okay. Well, I don't know because that was actually also just a bunch of like studio musicians.
I'm kidding. Okay. But who knows?
Okay, because I was wondering, is it possible that he had heard of Germs? Because I mean, again, Redd Kross is, you guys were, and it's still germinating, right? But and maybe even Black Flag was still finding their feet. But Germs was pretty popular at that time, as I understand.
Well, actually, technically, I don't think it was the Germs show. We played with the Germs at the Hong Kong
that summer
in those same months.
Yeah.
But the first show was with Black Flag and another band called UXA. So it was just kind of like it would have been a sleepy weeknight probably that just kind of had some like
magic.
Yeah, but also magic, but it was also just kind of a standard night of the scene, like at any given night. And I think that, but my guess is that he knew about this underground movement that was happening, bubbling under in Chinatown, and that's
well. Also, from the beginning, the LA scene and San Francisco scenes both had Slash magazine and Search and Destroy magazine, which were really interesting art magazines that had decent distribution.
Yeah.
That if you follow the arts, you would pick up a Slash magazine. So if we didn't have that, I don't know. If we didn't have those early kind of ways to get out there, who knows what would have happened. I don't. David Bowie wouldn't have known about it. Although, there's also Rodney Bingenheimer too, because Rodney Bingenheimer was supportive of everything, and he was a friend of Rodney. So it's probably a Rodney connection as well.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Oh, okay. That's a question for Rodney then.
Yeah.
Maybe he. Okay.
Oh,
Rodney was an A&R person.
I told him to go to the Hong Kong cafe. I said, "Oh yeah, you like LA punk rock? Go to Chinatown."
Want to see something new?
I mean, Rodney's story is when Rodney was working as not an A&R, but kind of a sub A&R for Mercury Records. Bowie came and he took him around to to all the record label to meet the people who worked there for the Man Who Sold the World album. And Bowie was in a dress, like he wore the dress to these meetings, the one that he's wearing on the cover. Of the one cover, not the cartoon cover, but the other one.
Right. On the couch.
Yeah. So it's just like hippies are weird. I mean, like David Bowie. I mean, I'm currently reading Rose Simpson's book, from the Incredible String Band, and it's weird when you just have like weird eccentrics and put them on stage. The interesting things can happen.
So speaking of weird eccentrics, Darby Crash. Sure. What were your guys' experiences? What are some of your memories with Darby or being in that orbit?
Well, we were more, I personally I became friends with Pat. We both became friends with Pat more closely than Darby.
But later.
Yeah, but Darby was, he was just like, kind of like at the time, at that last couple of years of his life, he was kind of just hustling for himself and kind of like, it seems like he was starting to become, influential amongst the new kids that were falling into the scene and kind of trying to figure out what he was going to get from that. But as a human being, I don't really know, because I didn't know him personally, like say that Pat knew him. We didn't know him on that level. But he was really good at creating a myth, like in the classic rock and roll sense. So we were very aware of the various mythology of Darby. Darby was one of the first persons to kind of in the LA scene to create any kind of mystique for himself.
I think the history's been unkind to the legacy of Darby Crash. And
really, I thought they made him like Jim Morrison.
I don't know. To me, it seems more like maybe it was the movie wasn't a very serious thing, and I don't know. It seems like because he kind of died a bit of a laughingstock, sadly, and it's unfortunate because granted, I was 12 and very impressionable, but to me, at that time in 1979, he was everything that he sang about. That puzzled panther and stalking his prey. He was super. He had a charisma and a magnetism that was palpable, and for him to be in the room when you were there, it felt like the room was heightened. It was different, and drugs took a bad toll on him, and whatever the way things turned out. But the fact that like the Germs GI album isn't really available on streaming platforms, or at least
it's not, because I know it's extremely.
It is, because there was a period
revered.
there where it wasn't, not long ago, and I think maybe things were in flux for a moment.
Right.
But I don't know. I read, that was something I was kind of talking about. Like I was reflecting in 2020, and I finally read that oral history. What's the Germs book called?
Is that the Don Bowles one?
Well, it's called What We Do Is Secret. Yeah, I think Don might have been.
Don's heavily involved, but I think that was it was like an oral. I don't think Don was completely at the helm of that.
No, but it was there's another, maybe Brendan.
I think he was involved with that, because that was coming at the same time as the new Tom Bomb book.
What's Brendan's last name?
Brendan Mullen.
Brendan Mullen. Like that book was super sense memory for me. There was like things I hadn't thought about and for years. And I don't know. I guess it's hard. I can't overstate what an effect that he had and that they had on my mentality at the time. I mean, like, to the extent of like, Jeff saw the Beatles when he was 2. He says that it was like a trauma with a lowercase t. But when John Lennon died, for me it was meaningful, but it was completely overshadowed by the fact that Darby Crash had died, and completely overshadowed. I mean, he meant a lot to my world, and I don't know. For some reason, I get the sense that people that sort of they think of him still as the wasted clown that was spit on by HB kids at his last concert. Like,
I don't
that
think so.
Somehow stuck.
I think
I don't think that's.
I think if you do over 30 minutes of research on Darby, you'll go beyond that. I think.
I totally don't think that's what, because most people didn't see that stuff. I mean, we saw it, but most people weren't there. So like, therefore, it just doesn't really.
Well, like you said, you have to go beyond 30 minutes and dig deeper, though. So I don't know. I think it might be the first impression for some.
I don't even remember that crappy shit. I only remember like the really amazing stuff, like the crappy last couple of performances. They're not even in the forefront of my mind. And I'm
not even sure if I was there. I think I saw one of them, or so I saw one of the Darby Crash band shows.
Yeah, I mean, they were bad, but then they did the reunion Germs show, and that was one of the best shows they ever did. So it was great.
Yeah.
The Starwood one.
There's a little story there.
Well, that's the one where he got the money to
It's 3 days before he.
Yeah.
Right. See, I don't even put that. I remember the show. I didn't even think in terms of like really the whole story. Like 3 days later, he would kill himself with the money from that. I just read that book. Most people just remember the good stuff. Most people, like, who are like, especially music fans, they're just They're just thinking about like what they liked about something. They don't really weigh themselves down with too much of like the horror show, unless it's like, like a really long, in-depth story like the Brian Wilson tale or something that's really like an epic.
Whenever I'm introducing someone to the Germs, their first impression is always like, what is this noise? Why is the guy growling? But then you give them the lyric sheet, and then by the end of side one, they're like, I need to work with this for a while. They're keen to go deeper.
Well, the fun thing about them, the Germs, they were just like so they were so bratty. I mean, you listen to the GI album, you think it's very kind of dark, and it is dark, but their live shows were all about just complete and total chaos. And they were very fun oriented. It was like it was just guitars falling apart, microphones going out, things just collapsing. Like their shows didn't end, they just collapsed. And they were magical at doing that.
Have you seen that video at the Punk Rock Museum of Germs?
I haven't been.
Oh, it's fantastic. Fat Mike was able to get, you remember the movie Up in Smoke, right? And they had the Battle of the Bands. Germs were in there. They filmed it, but it never made the movie, right?
He got the footage? I've never seen that.
He got the footage from Lou Adler. So if you go into the Punk Rock Museum, there's a screen that's doing that, and it's exactly as you said, Jeff. It's just you watch this 6 minutes of a just disintegrating gig.
Wow, that's awesome. Man, that's my favorite Germs record was always the Live at the Whiskey A Go Go, the one that's from that same period. The Donneria period.
Oh yeah.
There, the drums. The one time that they had a girl drummer who we always thought, on their first single that looked like the Mona Lisa, and I remember calling Pat, and we would call Pat and ask him, "Tell us the Donneria story." She was their first drummer. She didn't know how to play drums from the forming single, and he said that she was a friend of theirs from school that managed to get equipment by telling her grandmother that she had cancer. So that's how she bought the band's gear. So that's the forming drummer. So that's the kind of mischief the Germs were. That's what they were kind of about. So there was a lot of comedy under the tragedy. So,
well, I mean, and maybe that is also some part of the legacy. I mean, that's something that I think that we deal with because we're very quick to use humor as well, and that comedy. Film often was as much of an influence as the Beatles for us, or maybe not as much, but influential to us. And people often especially in like critical corners of, like maybe, music, journalism or something, they don't necessarily like it when a band is aiming for your funny bone at times, or are willing to use that or whatever, because it's somehow it's maybe you're not serious or something, or maybe somehow there's a reason why this is a joke band or something, or that's a label that could come up. Joke
because it's more challenging. Some of the heaviest art is hilarious.
Yeah, sure.
And it's way more challenging to actually like to consume and to kind of commit to whether it's affecting you on a funny way or you're missing out on something. So I think people always think you're trying to pull the wool over their eyes when you use humor, and that's never my intention.
I never thought Germs used humor willingly. I think it was just a byproduct of their like disorganization. It's almost like outsider art, you know. They're not working with any rules, and the expectations that people have are like they're looking at this from a completely different angle.
Yeah, well, you got to also remember these groups were like barely out of high school.
Oh yeah.
So there is the huge bratty element, It's like, being like the weirdo high school freaks. Like in California, to be like a weirdo like Pat and Darby in a surfer town would have been very alienating. So the way to survive would be to find other freaks and just try to have as much fun as
And
possible.
that they did. So look, guys, I know you got a hard stop. I'm going to let you get out of here. Again, this movie, Born Innocent, is a fantastic documentary.
Oh,
This
thanks.
you've probably heard it 1,000 times. 2024 being the year of Redd Kross, but it is really nice to see you guys really getting that level, that pedestal, and being able to share your story in the ways that you have been. And it's beautiful to watch. I'll look forward to seeing what you guys get up to next. Steven, I know you've got 10,000 Melvin's gigs lined up for next year. It looks like. I hope, I pray, I'll light a candle that you guys do make your way to Australia at some point, and maybe we can even host a screening of the film while you guys are here.
There's talk. Are you in Australia?
Right now, I'm in California. Actually, I'm going to be at the Belasco on Saturday, whatever.
Great.
But
Awesome.
but I live in Sydney. That's where I'm at 10 months out of the year.
I have a feeling it's going to happen in 2025, but maybe later than sooner.
Okay, well,
Yeah. So hopefully people are still.
it'll happen when it happens. But yeah, all right. Well, fellas, thanks again. I do want to make sure everyone knows reddkrossfilm.com. Find a screening of this documentary if you can. Pick up the Redd Kross album and, of course, the book. And gentlemen, thanks again for your time, and happy trails.
Yes, thank you very much.
So much.
All right.
Bye.
See
you on-
you on
See ya.
Saturday.
Will do.
hopefully.
Oh man, it's always fun to hear those guys banter back and forth. I could listen to that all day. I mean, if they have a service that just let us eavesdrop on their conversations all the time, I mean, they would have 1 million subscribers easily. But look, until that happens, next best thing you could do is see the Born Innocent documentary, reddkrossfilm.com. Of course, if Redd Kross is in your neighborhood, make sure to check them out live. There's going to be additional tour dates, as I understand, throughout 2025. So we'll see how that goes. And of course, go see Steven and Dale as they tour with Melvins. Tons of new dates have been announced, so Google them up and go see them when they're in your town. That's your homework. Lots to do. Get on it. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Huge thanks to everyone who's sharing these episodes on social media, putting them up in Reddit forums and Facebook groups. And those of you who are leaving positive reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, well, there's a special place in heaven for each of you. We'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.